Hi, everybody. This is Professor Owens-Dickey. You can turn on your cameras now and we'll get started. So welcome to TE 532. I'm happy to have you all in my class. What we'll do this evening shouldn't take us too long, but what I'd like to do is introduce myself quickly, get a feel for who's in my class. So if you guys can give me 2 or 3 quick sentences when I take attendance to just kind of let me know where you are in your career. Like, are you a full-time student right now? Are you currently in a classroom? What type of certification you're pursuing, that kind of thing. That's really helpful to me moving forward to know how much resources and information to provide you, and also to avoid things that might feel redundant to you. So we'll do that. After that, we'll kind of walk through the syllabus because many of you have had questions about particularly the textbooks. So we can talk about that for a couple seconds and make sure that I'm giving you as up-to-date information as I can about that. And just kind of give you the lens from which this class is taught and give you a preview of what to expect. And then if you guys have any other questions beyond that, we'll take care of that. Sound okay? And moving forward, there are a few other classes like this. If there's ever a time that you're not going to be able to make it, let me know. I would like some feedback on our next live class. The 2 guest speakers that are going to be coming, or I should say aren't going to be coming to talk to us about common assessments in special education. They're going to record their lecture. So I kind of think I'd like to watch it along with you, so that when they're done presenting that information, the questions that came to your mind, you could ask me right then and there. But you guys can send me an email as to like what your opinion of that is, or I could share it out as soon as they have it ready, and maybe we use the class period just for conversation around that. So any ideas that you have as to how to make the most out of that opportunity, let me know what your thoughts are. So, like I said, my name is Professor Owens-Dickey. I've been doing special education for a really long time now, like 30 years plus. When I started out a long time ago at LSU down in New Orleans, I made the comment that I would never go into special education as a speech language pathologist. So never say never. I've been doing education for 25 years and love it. So the first part of my career was as a speech language pathologist. I fell in love with autism in particular pretty quickly, and then moved into the school world and then moved into the admin world. And in our state of Michigan, I'm involved with a couple of different state level things that have to do specifically with autism and how we do special education programming in our state. So it's my first love. So if I get too heavy into autism, sometimes you guys can remind me, not everybody loves it as much as I do, and that you need more information in other eligibility categories too. That's fair. Sometimes I need that little reminder. What else about me? I have a couple of kids. They're both grown. I have a 25-year-old daughter that lives in Royal Oak. She is something called an IO psychologist, industrial or organizational psychologist. So it's kind of like sports psychology, but for the business world. And I have a 20-year-old that's at MSU and is in pre-law. So that's just a thumbnail of me. I'm going to just do, how about this? I'm going to take attendance. So when I call your name, just take your mic off. Just give us a couple, 3 sentences like, hey, I'm at Saginaw Valley. I'm a full-time student. I'm pursuing LD. Or, I'm over at XYZ school district. I'm currently teaching blah, 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 but I'm getting my cert in. That kind of a thing. That would be super helpful to me. All right. So Jamie Bacon, where you at?
Hello, my name is Jamie, and I am a full-time student at SVSU. This semester, I'm currently in a special education and a regular classroom for learning disabilities.
Gotcha. All right. Kaylee Bronson. No, Kaylee. All right, Aubrey Brown.
Hi, I'm Aubrey. I'm currently on my way home from work, so I won't be on video for very long, but I am an elementary education major with a focus in learning disabilities.
Thanks, Aubrey. And if I mispronounce anybody's name, you guys just correct me, okay? Next on the list is Mia Dibble. Dibble?
Oop, it's Maya Diebel.
Maya.
I'm
Okay.
currently at volleyball practice with my girls because I also coach as well as teach.
Awesome.
I have a degree already in elementary education, but they needed special education teachers. So I've been emergency certified and I'm trying to get my certification in special education and I'm going for LD.
Gotcha. That is often the case, Maya. All right, Shane Hood. Are you with us, Shane? Nope. All right. And if I miss somebody, just put it in the chat that I missed you and I'll come back around. Next is Alice Hudson.
Hi, I'm Alice Hudson. I have an elementary education degree already. I am emergency certified, also teaching at Owen Gage for my second year in elementary special education. So I'm going for my learning disability special education endorsement.
Okay. See, this is why it's helpful. I'm already hearing lots of LD, so that helps me focus. Mary Caravas.
Hi, this is Terry. My nickname is Terry, and I apologize for not having my camera on. I'm using my school computer, and there's something funky with the camera.
No.
So I'm at school right now. I'm in Shepherd School District.
Okay.
And I have teacher certification through SVSU, the original ACE class,
Mhm.
and my principalship, master degree, and now I am going back for a special education certification, ASD.
Yay. Happy to have you.
Thanks.
How about Kylie Lukowski?
I'm Kylie. I'm a full-time student here at SVSU and I'm pursuing LD.
Okay.
Do you have like breadsticks or anything?
Kennedy Moorer.
Hi, I'm Kennedy and it's Mauer.
Mauer. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a full-time student at SVSU and I'm going into upper elementary with a focus in cognitive impairment.
Not garlic.
Megan McAllister.
Garlic and bread and toast it.
Oh, turn off your mic if you're not currently on. That'll help us hear each other better. So turn your mic off unless your name is Megan McAllister. All right, moving on. Adam McElye.
Close. It was Macaulay.
McElay. Okay.
Yep. All right. This is my first semester at SVSU, and I'm going for my BCBA and ASD.
Happy to have you. We'll talk a little bit about that BCBA piece in just a second when we get to the syllabus. Oh, sorry, guys. Derek McNitt.
I'm a full-time student at SVSU and I'm going for my ASD cert.
Makes me happy to hear that there are still kids out there going for their ASD cert. It's not as common anymore. Heather Mulheron.
You got it right. Hey, everybody. I'm Heather, and I'm a special education school social worker in Monroe. And I am getting my ABA certification so that I can eventually become a BCBA.
That's fantastic. All right. How about Amanda Munger? You there, Amanda? Nope. Nope. Okay. Alexandra Perkins Craven. I can see you talking, Alex, but I can't hear you. I don't know if it's your earbuds or whatnot, but am I the only one that's not hearing?
No, I can't hear her.
Oh, shoot. We can't hear you, Alex. If nothing else, you can put it in the chat box so we can find out a little bit about you, what you're pursuing, where you're currently at. While she's typing, we'll go ahead and let Ryan Talaski speak up.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I am a full-time student at SVSU for my ASD cert in lower L.
Awesome. ASD lower L. Okay, Angelica Tibbetts.
Hi, I'm Angelica. I am going for elementary special education, specializing in learning disabilities.
Gotcha. Thank you, Angelica. Autumn? Todd? No Autumn? Okay. How about Kelly Trudeau?
Hi, I am working in a resource room with my emergency certification, so I'm working on getting LD certified.
Okay, gotcha. God bless all you people that are having to do this emergency cert. We really appreciate you. Michelle Waddy.
Hi, I'm currently a full-time teacher at Quebec High School. Although I have my degree in early childhood education, I am on an emergency cert as well, special ed teacher, but I'm working on my ASD certification.
Okay. Emma Walsh.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a full-time student at Saginaw Valley, and I'm going into elementary special ed with CI.
Okay. Gotcha. Emily Walther.
Hi, I'm Emily. Yeah, I'm Emily. And you said my last name right. Thank you.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm going into upper elementary grades 3 through 6 and specializing in learning disabilities.
Okay. Happy to have you. Just a couple more kiddos and then we can dive into the syllabus or students. Olivia Wazak.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm doing lower elementary ed with cert in CI.
Okay. All righty. How about Mecca Wedeker?
Hi, it's actually Miko. So my name is Miko Whitaker.
Gotcha.
I am currently a teacher at Avondale Middle School. I'm also going under emergency cert. I was a general ed teacher. I taught kindergarten and 3rd grade. Moved to middle school. They wanted me to work in resource room as a resource room teacher. I'm currently teaching English and mathematics under an emergency certification. And I started out at Saginaw Valley State going into autism for a master's, but I'm switching over to LD.
Gotcha. Boy, that's a jump from kindergarten, 3rd grade to middle school resource. Middle school is a fun time though. That's one of my favorite programs to supervise. Let me see though, what's in the chat. Alex. So Alex is a full-time student and you're going into CI. Glad to have all of you here. Let me share my screen and pull up the syllabus and let's talk a little bit, first of all, about what's going on at Saginaw Valley in terms of special education teacher training. I will try to keep it brief in case you've already heard this spiel before. I don't want to waste your time, but if you do have questions and it's the first time you're hearing it, please let me know. If I can't answer it, I will find out those answers for you, okay? And then we'll take specifically a deeper dive into the syllabus for this course so you can kind of get a feel for what this course is and how it's set up and what you're going to be learning about.
Professor?
Yes.
Megan McAllister, she said that she sent you an email. She had an emergency, so she couldn't be here. She just wanted
Okay.
me to relay the message.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep, I'm recording it and I'll do that every time. So if ever there's a class and it's a snowstorm or bad weather, please don't ever break your neck to get where you're going. We can always make arrangements, so that you can view the class and you can let me know that you viewed the class in some way, shape, or fashion. We'll figure that out. I understand what it's like to be working full-time somewhere or have a full life and try to be a student all at the same time.
So
My
are you
main
wanting us, I'm sorry, are you wanting us to take notes also? Because that's what the link said for the Zoom meeting, to turn in notes. Are you wanting us to take notes over the syllabus and things that you're going over?
No, you don't need to do that. No, maybe for the next one where the two school psychologists will be talking about the common assessments. I've taken attendance. So, I mean, that's my proof that you are here and you're participating. But my approach as an instructor is always going to be way more focused on, are you as students learning? Am I doing the best that I can to prepare you to be really good educators? So if you email me questions, do you want me to use, this style, or do you care about the format for this or that or the other thing? I'm really focused on what content are you learning and can apply. And in terms of essays and written work that you turn in, as long as it's well organized and I can understand what you're communicating, I'm going to be good with that. But if you really need a quick answer from me, send me a text message. That's the quickest way to get a response from me. So if it's really urgent, send me that quick text so that I know you need a quick response. Before I kind of dive into the syllabus for this class, so Saginaw Valley is taking a look at how we're preparing teachers to be ready for the students that are out there right now. And to give you a sense of what's happening in the educational world over the last 10 years, starting from the kids that are in our early childhood programming that move through special education, whether it's at a local district level or at a more complex, higher level of intensity, ISD level, the kids are getting harder, I would say. And they're coming with more background in trauma and just other types of behavioral issues that, 20, 25 years ago, there were a few kids that presented that way, but there's just a lot more of them that present that way now than in years past. So in thinking about what does good instruction look like, you could say the same thing about what does good therapy look like if you're speech and language or OT or PT or ABA or BCBA. The same could be said true about what's happening as an instructor. So as an instructor, you're going to need to know that content. What's your content area? Some of you talked about you're pursuing LD, some said CI, some said ASD. So there'll be that level of content, but there will also be core curriculum type content like ELA, math, all of those kinds of things. Think of that as the what. You'll be learning that for sure as you move through coursework. But one of the things that has been sort of missing in teacher prep is the how. How do you teach kids that are not necessarily always available for learning, or who present with layers of trauma or behavioral issues? How do you even begin to worry about teaching core content? So that's why this extra layer of embedding sort of that applied behavioral analysis methodology into the coursework has been woven into each course as you prepare as a special educator. So it'll be up to you guys as you're learning more about that type of behavioral methodology. How far do you want to go with it? Do you just want to have that information so that you're a better educator? Or do you want to do something with that? Do you want to keep going and pursue your master's and actually sit for a board certified behavior analysis analyst exam? So just know that as you see changes and as you see textbooks being added to courses, that's the why behind it. And so I kind of feel like some days it feels like we're building the plane as we're flying it and trying to embed it into it. Because my primary role is autism and supervising autism programs and services, and I'm involved with a clinic here where I live, I feel like I have access to lots of BCBAs and really good information around ABA. So I can fold that in, and I can honestly tell you that we use it religiously in our programming, and it makes a huge difference in how kids make progress and how they respond to our instruction. So I fully believe in it. I think that you can learn from it, and I think it will really make you a really good instructor if you have a good understanding. It doesn't mean you need to use ABA as a science, as a therapy, but it does mean that you'll understand what those interventions are and how you could use them. And in this class as a whole, the way that I look at it, and I'll scroll down real quick, is I'm thinking of assessment just like everything else is happening in our special education world right now, which is through the lens of multi-tiered system of supports. And I know that many educators up until recently have kind of almost felt like that's just one more acronym, one more thing, but it's becoming more and more actually real. So there's some real life things that are happening that are starting to give this some legs. One of those big things is related to Medicaid. So in the school world, often special education programs and services are able to bill Medicaid for some of the work that we do. And up until recently, nothing related to ABA or not a whole lot of behavioral intervention was captured in that funding. Now it is in a tiered way. So there are dollars that are set aside for kids for mental and behavioral health prior to them ever having an IEP. And they have a couple of labels. One is called C4S, Caring for Kids, and the other one is called 31N. And those are 2 pots of money from our state through Medicaid allocated to help support behavioral and mental health for students in our schools, primarily before they're ever found eligible for special ed services. Not exclusively, but primarily. The other thing that Medicaid did was expand something called school-based services. So folks like speech language therapists, PTs, OTs, those are considered school-based services. They bill for their services in schools all the time. So they've expanded that to include the work of BCBAs in the school setting. So that's sort of unfolding this year, and I imagine it will continue to unfold over the next couple of years, like what that's actually going to look like. But the result of those 3 things happening, more of a focus on what's happening before an IEP, what's happening once a kid has an IEP, what's happening when a kid has a really meaty, beefy IEP and needs everything we've got. How do we work together? Because what happened, as is often happens with state initiatives, is things get sort of thrown out without a lot of explanation. And we as educators sort of scramble around and try to figure out how's that supposed to work after the fact. So professionals are out in the educational field talking to each other saying, I'm over here doing this special education work. You're over there doing your special education work. It's all sort of related. Maybe we should be talking to each other about how we do this work. And that's sort of the focus of multi-tiered systems of supports. How do all the players start to systematize what we're doing, work together collaboratively, effectively, and more efficiently? So it's kind of through that lens that I thought about how do we talk about assessment in that same light? Because there are things that happen before a kid ever gets identified as potentially having special needs or needing to receive special education services. What are those things? What do we call them? Who's involved in it? You as a special educator, how are you going to know about it? What's your role in that? And then there is a process by which a child is found eligible for special education services. What is that evaluation process? How does that unfold? How do you develop all of the legal paperwork called an IEP, an individualized educational plan? How does that get written? What's in it? Who's involved? How do you progress monitor those goals and assess kids that are already in special education? How do you show progress? That's going to be part of your teacher evaluation every year. And what about those really super tough kids that we call, you know, the kids that need the tier 3, everything we've got type intervention? Who's involved in that? What does that look like? What are the resources involved with that? If you're an LD teacher, are you going to be involved with that? And if so, what would it look like? So that's kind of how I set this class up. So you could be thinking about, you know, kids kind of can come in a certain way and move through. Sometimes they come in and move to a certain tier of intervention and stay there. Sometimes using a tiered system is a way to show that you're making progress. Yes, maybe they still need special education help, but it used to be tier 3 on steroids, and now you're down to, like, you know, tier 1. Some days you have some tier 1 stuff going on. So it's nice to be able to think of it more in a tiered sense than just straight up everything special education. So how about I stop for a second? Did I spark any questions by all that comment?
Can you repeat those 2 funds that you were discussing? That was something C to S, I think you said.
One is 31N and the other is C4S.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's all related to Medicaid. But they also, like I mentioned, they're supposed to be a coordinated effort. And it's all tied to assessment and intervention and part of, you know, some of the things that we'll talk about. So that right here, this little 1, 2, 3, 4 that I'm hovering over, that really is the meat and potatoes of how this class is set up. And I feel like our state has a really nice website that gives you lots, maybe, you know, an overwhelming amount of resources about what it is, which I think sometimes can lend itself to inaction when you're given too much information and you don't know where to start. So I hope that this class helps you kind of understand, if you're a classroom teacher, where do you even start? What's your role in this? So let me scroll down to kind of how this goes. So this first module was just kind of to get you oriented. Some things are compliance driven, like the CEC standards, the CAEC, and the 5th edition BCBA standards. That's all tied to like compliance that the university has to show that you have a clear understanding of what are the professional ethics and guidelines that dictate what it is you learn and how you conduct yourself once you are in the classroom. So that's why it's important for you to have had that assignment so that you do know that, and that you could articulate it if somebody asked you, or you know where to go if you needed to look it up. And then we kind of laid out what are some of those tier 1 things that happen before a child is ever found eligible for special education. So I think I took my Blissey out, so I probably need to update our syllabus, but you guys learned about MTSS. You learned about PBIS, which is part of it. You learned a little bit about RTI, which are all considered part of that MTSS system and have something to do with informing tier 1 supports. So when you are out there in the world, when working and you're in a building, and particularly at the elementary level, there is a responsibility on special education and educators to do something called child find. So it's possible that you'll be on an RTI team, or you might be on a child study team or something to that effect at the building level. And what your role would be to help identify those kids that are struggling and how you start to put some of those tier 1 supports and interventions in place. And not only how you put them in place, but how you progress monitor and to determine, is that going to be sufficient or do you need to take the next step? So that's what tier 1 is all about. Then we'll get into tier 2 starting today, and start talking about, okay, then what happens if you've tried the tier 1 and it hasn't been sufficient to meet kids' needs? How does a child even begin to start down the path of being found eligible, of needing special education programs and or supports? What is that? What's a read? Who's in charge of it? Who are the players? What's a MET? How often is that due? How many eligibilities are there in special education? And what are the rules that dictate what we do in Michigan when it comes to implementing special education programs? So hopefully you're starting to take a look at what those things are, and we'll get familiar. And I will say as a tidbit, as you go through the class, I would recommend it as you have questions, connect with each other. Ask a couple of other students first if you have questions. And if you really can't figure it out, then bring it to me. That will be a great way to get you in the habit of just collaborating with other professionals, which will be huge in your career. I've put different opportunities for some office hours on here, but we're not locked into that. If this doesn't work for you, 4 p.m. on a Monday, just send me a text and let me know that. Like, hey, I have a second job. I really can't do it at that time. Are you available? And we'll figure something out, okay? Then we're going to get into some of the actual like true life. How do kids get evaluated in special education? What are some of the common assessments that you might be doing, or you may just be reading about? It depends on what district you're in. So some special education teachers actually do some assessments and do it themselves. Others are relying on school psychologists to do that, as well as speech path, OT, PTs, etc. But you'll get some exposure to what some of those common assessments are, what they look like, and what they're being used for, what information you can learn from it. We'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the IEP itself, the present level of academic achievement and functional performance, which is a huge, if you can get that down, yay. That and writing measurable goals. If you're not already in a district, you will find that there is a person in your district called a monitor, and they are always looking at how good of a job are we doing at writing measurable goals. And every now and then you might get a tap on the shoulder about that. So if you can leave this class understanding what's the recipe for writing a measurable goal and what does a good PLAP statement need to have, I'll be so happy about that. When we get into late October, early November, we'll start looking at, okay, you've got kids, you're a special education teacher, they're on your caseload, you're working on those IEP goals. How do I measure their progress? What are curriculum-based measures? How do I take data? How do I show that I'm making progress so that when my supervisor or director or whomever is asking me to show that for my evaluation, I can easily do that? What are some of the assessments that are out there that all districts do, like either the MSTEP or the MyAccess? What's that? That's a whole nother layer of some complication that you can learn about and be ready for. And then finally, we'll spend time with the more intensive kids that need our tier 3 interventions. So that's going to be more heavily loaded. This is when you're really going to need that book that speaks to ABA and know what that is and have access to it. So I'll try to give you as much information as I can about what is ABA, how you're going to use that really intensively for the harder kids, as well as fold in a little bit of that trauma informed so that you have both of those as resources for yourselves. And then we'll be wrapping it up by talking about collaboration, because more and more, as I mentioned, with more difficult and challenging kids, we need more people at the table besides just educators. Certainly our general ed peers and colleagues, but you might be working with outside behaviorists, outside speech language, outside OT, PT, physicians, social workers, etc. How do you be a good collaborator? There's actually a science behind collaboration, and I'll try to bring some of that information to you so that you're better able to do that and more effective at it. So that in a nutshell is kind of it. The only thing I really didn't spend a whole lot of time on is the tier 1. But before I do that, let's go back and talk textbooks. Then we'll talk what are the tiers, and then I'm going to let you guys ask questions. So as you can see on here, these first two, the applied behavioral analysis and the counsel for exceptional children, those are the two that the university is saying that you need for all special education courses. I will say in terms of the CEC book, I'm personally not referencing it in this class. So if you're going to put a priority, this assessment book is the priority. We reference this a lot in the class. You have a little time to get the ABA book, because I think it was what, module 6 before we really get heavy into ABA kinds of things. But if you're in other courses, go ahead and get what you need right now and don't wait. But just know that's something that the university is doing, and that's tied to folding in ABA as a methodology into all of the special ed teacher preparation. All right, let me stop share so I can see your faces. I'm going to check the chat real quick. Are students in tier 2 receiving special ed? Yeah, if you're at tier 2, that would be considered special ed. So I think if it's not on a visual that's on the module, the first module about what our tiered supports, there is one on the MDE website that kind of will show you. But if you just Google MTSS, that little pyramid with different, the green, yellow, red triangle almost always pops right up. I'm going to really oversimplify what the tiers are, okay? Really 10,000 foot view of what does it mean. So in general, in the educational world, there are 3 tiers available. Tier 1 is available to all kids. It's those supports and strategies and interventions that can be used across an entire classroom or even entire building. So PBIS, positive behavior supports, is one of those examples that lots of buildings will use for the entire building to help improve student engagement and achievement. So think of things like teachers will often put up like what the schedule for the day is for all the students, things like that. Those are just considered like universal. Everybody gets one, just like Oprah says, everybody gets one. That's tier 1 support. Most learners do just fine as long as you're paying attention to that. But again, that's why having some knowledge of what are those behaviorist principles, those ABA methodologies, to even know what's on the menu, what are some tier 1 behavioral strategies that I could use that all kids would benefit from, even if they aren't a special learner. So think about yourselves in terms of how often you access a schedule or some type of visual to help you function. You heard my alarm go off to remind me to do something. That's a tier 1 support, right? Most of us use some sort of reminders, visuals, schedules, etc., to help us be more efficient. That's a great example of a tier 1. Signs on bathrooms, the male and female for non-readers, tier 1. Most kids in schools, like I said, do just fine with that. Sometimes kids need more than that. And those are the kids that get brought to building admin or whatever team is set up to sort of help guide that special education process. So there are some interventions that are still falling under tier 1 that are prior to an IEP that teams can try. RTI is one of those, response to intervention. I think ICT, instructional consultation teams, is still out there. Some different things where folks in a building that have a little more expertise, like a speech language pathologist, like a social worker, might be on that team. And their role would be, I'm not so much directly working with that kid, but I am working with his teacher to give her or him ideas of some different interventions that they can try. We're going to try it for a specified amount of time. Usually it's around 3 months while you take some data and work with the parent, work with that teacher and see if that was enough. That's still tier 1. If that's not sufficient, then folks start to say, wow, this kid is really starting to fall behind. I'm very concerned that despite our best efforts, despite increased interventions, this is looking like a kid that needs more specialized support. That's when you start thinking about tier 2 special education support, which would kick off everything that you're going to be learning about in terms of the READ process, which is basically think of as like the referral process, how you enter the special education world through the READ process. It's parent consent. There's always a case manager that kind of helps facilitates who's going to be involved in that evaluation, how that data is going to be pulled together and presented to parents, how the plan is written in the IEP to help support the kid. And so some great examples of tier 2 would be, let's say a second grader that's just really struggling with some comprehension and verbal expression. So a read is done, speech language pathologist does an evaluation and says, yeah, this is a kid with a language impairment. I'm going to put them on my caseload and we're going to work on this in some functional ways to help them improve their classroom performance. That's a great example, tier 2. Another one would be a student that's really struggling in a specific area. Let's say, it's reading comprehension. So folks get involved and they determine, yeah, not only do they need some speech and language help with the language comprehension, they also need some time in the resource room for some specific reading interventions. That would also be considered tier 2. It's not overly intensive, but it's certainly more intensive than what a straight up gen ed teacher would be. And here's something that if you want to write down just for future reference, because it's probably going to be on every special ed test you ever take, is, what does it take to be found eligible for special ed? It's 2 things. One, you have to be found as meeting criteria, as impaired in one of the 13 special ed areas that exist, so that you have a special education impairment. And number 2, and the one that we always forget, it impacts educational performance. So it is possible to have a special education impairment and it does not impact educational performance. One of those topics that comes up a lot is in speech and language pathology. So kids that might have like a speech articulation issue, but they're still understandable and folks can understand them just fine and it doesn't impact them in the classroom. Parents can get upset that they didn't meet criteria, but unless it's impacting them educationally, they really didn't meet the eligibility criteria for receiving special education programs and or services. So that aside, moving into tier 3, there are those kids that, their local districts are really struggling to support them. They tried the route of perhaps resource room, speech language pathology. Maybe they even, that district ran their own like LD type classes. They tried all those things. And despite all of it, they're just not able to meet the needs of that kid for whatever reason. It could be an academic reason. It could be trauma related. It could be behavior related. And then they're saying things like, wow, I really feel like this kid needs like functional behavioral analysis, or they need more intensive types of behavioral supports, or they need to be looked at as considered for maybe an ISD run program with more intensive, everything they've got types of supports. Those are your tier 3 supports. Those are beyond, it's not everybody gets one. It's not tier 2 where you could do it like in a small group fashion. Typically tier 2 supports you can think of as small group. It's more individualized, but you could still deliver those interventions in a group of like 3 to 5 to even 8 kids. They're still kind of okay with it. When a kid needs one-on-one types of interventions or more restrictive environments, or it's, it comes with like somebody's got to be at shoulder's length, or the interventions are being delivered frequently, you're talking tier 3. That's a tier 3 intervention. So that's the best and simplest way to think about it. And maybe that's oversimplified. But in terms of helping get your heads kind of wrapped around what does that mean, MTSS, that's a great way to think about it. And it's also helpful to think about then who might be the players. Who are the players that are primarily delivering those tier 1 interventions? Probably a lot of the general ed folks, right? Who are the players that are delivering most of the tier 2? Probably local district special ed staff. Who are the players that are delivering most of the tier 3 highly specialized? Probably at your ISD level, not exclusively. Every district and county does things a little bit different and uniquely, but in general, what I just said is basically true. Uh-oh, I already took somebody's asking about the required books. Let me go back. So here are the required texts. It's in your syllabus, and the syllabus is embedded on the home page within Canvas, and it's also its separate tab. So you should be able to find the syllabus fairly easily. And this is what, on page what? 3? Yes. Nope, page 4. So here are the books. Applied Behavioral Analysis required for all special ed courses at Saginaw Valley. The CEC book required for all special ed courses. I will tell you this though, don't buy this one yet, no matter what, because I did hear from Dr. McFarland that there is a new edition coming out in October. And she promised to send me a PDF version of what you would need. So just pause on this one. If I can get it to highlight. Don't buy that one yet. Hold on. This one, the ABA, you're going to need when we get, I believe it was module 6, the ABA, Greg Hanley, trauma informed, that module, you'll need that. So that's down the line in the semester. The assessment book, there's quite a bit of reading in this book and note taking that you'll need. And I'm sorry about that, because I know reading a textbook and taking notes can be super boring, but unfortunately, some things in our world is just like any other profession. There's really no other way to get it into your brain other than reading it. and taking notes helps you remember what you read. So just know that it's for a reason, and it's to just help get it in your head, because once you're in the classroom, some of those processes that they reference, like the read, writing a PLAP, writing measurable goals, progress monitoring, my access, all those kinds of things, state testing, you will do them every single year, multiple times a year. So it's a key part of what you're going to be doing as a special educator. All right, guys, we've got about 10, 12 minutes left. I'm going to stop talking. What questions do you guys have?
I have a class at 5:30. Is it okay if I leave a little early to go?
Yep, we're going to be done by then anyway. I also have a 5:30, so you're good. And if you think of questions after we log off, just send it to me via email. And like I said, if I don't have the answer, I will get it for you. But the more feedback you give me as to what is helpful information, what's not helpful, that helps me be a better instructor. In previous classes, it's been super helpful for students to tell me things like, we're not getting enough information about how to support behavior. Where do I go for that information? Things like that. I can be super targeted in what I deliver. We can even change up what's in those modules if it's what's helpful to you guys. I just need to know it. Okay.
I love that in your syllabus you're focused a lot on trauma-informed care. Just as a school social worker, that's what we live every day. So I really, really appreciate that.
Okay.
There's a focus on and I think it's so important and so relevant, and I think it's something that's been seen for too long.
Yeah.
Go back to this.
So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Our social workers here where I work appreciate that too. And if it's helpful as we get closer to that, I can pull in some maybe some additional guest speakers to kind of speak to what does trauma-informed mean, as well as how do trauma-informed educators and professionals work with people that are more ABA minded. You may find that sometimes you feel like there's a little bit of a clash there, and there doesn't need to be. So maybe some conversation around that could be helpful to you guys. We'll see. All right, everybody. Well, it's good to meet you all. Please let me know what questions you have in this upcoming module, and I will see you, I think, in a couple of weeks, right? And if you need to meet with me prior to that, just reach out to me, okay? All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.